Hello and welcome to the Learning Technologies Summer Forum, final discussion panel session. It's accelerating your career in L&D. I would like to draw your attention to the wonderful panel we have here today. My name is James Booth. I'm just speaking while Donald gets his things sorted. So from my top left-hand corner we have Laura Matty, and then Sharon, Claffey, Zara, Kate and Donald. And I'm going to hand over to Donald and Sharon now. Thank you.
Great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Accelerating Your Career in L&D. We're going to give folks probably 2 more minutes before we start, but we're incredibly excited to have you all engage in this active and lively panel discussion. That's great. I can see you all in the chat. Let us know where you're from. That would be great. Let us know how the weather is. It's a great way to start. So if you're just joining now, we're going to wait about 1 more minute before we start Accelerating Your Career and Learning and Development at the Learning Technology Summer Forum. I believe this is the wrap-up session, so don't forget to use the hashtag LTSF20.
I just want to say a quick welcome back to everybody. We've got a number of names. I've sat in every one of the 22 sessions in the Learning Technology Summer Conference. I really want to say thank you to everyone who's come and joined a whole bunch of sessions here.
They get a badge, Don? Do they get a badge?
They get a badge of eternal thanks from me. That's the badge that we're sending out to everybody. And as always, lovely to see people from all over the world, different parts of the UK, different parts of the world, coming and joining us. Sharon, great to have you here again, and from a summer day in Sweden. That's wonderful. I saw Dzień dobry from somewhere, and I'm sorry I can't remember who it was in Poland. Hungary. Well, great to have you with us. Lovely to have our friends joining us from all over.
Right. I have to say, Jackie Bean, you spell Jackie the way my daughter does. It's pretty rare, so that's kind of cool. I love these things.
Jose, good to have you back from Guadalajara. I'm going to be quiet now.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I'm Sharon Claffey Kaliouby, VP of North America, so I'm calling to you all getting in here from Boston. I'm on my just startup as the second to last state in the States to be opening up or hitting phase 3. So I am on one of my every other days in the office and beyond excited that as it's a rainy day here, I'm not trying to do this from my front yard. So with that, we are going to jump into this panel discussion. There's going to be a section for you to add questions. We're going to ask that the questions are answered by the panelists, but I'm more than happy to have you guys have a dialogue, anything follow up. Put that in the chat if you want this topic to continue in a different space and different forum. All of us are incredibly excited. This is also a topic that when I was first introduced to it, it was focused on women in learning, and that was a really cool thing to develop careers. We're going to have the co-founder, #WomenInLearning, Kate Graham, speak to us as well. But I just wanted to give a little background here. This is a dialogue that is ever evolving. Dawn has talked about this topic way back 5 years ago in Orlando. On Mother's Day in the States in May, this was a very hot topic with folks mostly from North America on the West Coast and in Canada, but we had folks from all over the world as we do today. And I think that was the reason that we really wanted to get this put out, and the conversation could never be more important than it is today with all that's going on in these unprecedented times. So with that, my background being in the industry in various organizations for almost 20 years, super excited to always be thinking about my career. There's never a time when you should stop thinking about accelerating your L&D career. I'd like to first start and have them all introduce themselves, but I'm going to have Zara start off and share with us who she is, and what accelerated her career. And then we're going to take about 20 to 30 minutes to engage with you all and hear your conversations and expand on what you're going to hear Lorna, Kate, Dawn, and Zara talk about. As well as we're going to be providing a PDF with you with some of our top tips. And we're going to chat through some of this, so feel free to throw questions at us after or as the folks are introducing themselves and sharing with you all their catalyst or what accelerated their career and tips that you may gain from that. So with that, Zara, would love to hear from you.
So hi, I'm Zara. I'm Digital Learning Partner at Southwark Council and also a member of the Learning Technologies 30 Under 30 programme this year. And one of the things that was key in helping accelerate my career, I would say, was getting in the room. So a few years back I was working in a more junior role and my company was planning on introducing a blended learning management programme, and they were putting a team together to put that to start planning that program, and I'd never been in management or anything. I didn't really have anything to add to that, I thought, but I kind of just wanted to get in the room, understand the process, understand the thinking behind it. So I asked my manager if I could join the first meeting, and then just for that opportunity to be able to actually hear how you get from those initial planning, what's going on in those rooms, all those meetings, to the actual finished product, because I felt like that'd be a really helpful journey to understand. Normally in admin you hear at the end and you've kind of just got the list of, and now put these on the LMS so people can book onto it or schedule these sessions. So just trying to get in that room and understand it. But then when I was actually in that meeting, that first meeting, what I found was that, one, actually I could contribute to this. I'm sure everyone's got experience of being managed, or if not being a manager, you kind of know what good and bad management looks like. So you can still definitely add something, but also in that room we were trying to plan a blended learning program. No one in that room had experience of blended learning or digital learning really, and at the time neither did I really, but I was really interested in that area. I'd been learning a lot about it, I'd been researching a lot, so I was actually able to contribute that understanding and try to pivot the conversation away from let's do the same old but add on a new learning module so it's blended, and actually have it be more of a properly blended experience. And they recognised my knowledge in it, and then I was actually invited to be part of that team. So not only was I able to be in that first initial planning meeting where I thought I wouldn't add anything to the process but just listen in, I was then able to actually see that whole journey, be part of it, contribute and be recognised for that, and it gave me a really good understanding of management, which is quite a big area in L&D, but also just the strategy, the thought process and the planning and those discussions. And that's something that's really helped me to understand learning and development and shape my career and what I need to do moving forward, have that understanding before I'm in that role necessarily. So definitely getting in the room if you can.
I think that's great, and we actually had Vicky ask a question about being new to L&D, and I think, Zara, you being a 30 under 30 and new entry into the industry, incredibly impressive with the energy and the volume of talent coming into the learning industry. So thank you for sharing that. We also got another question: is there an opportunity for growth, especially in these times? Absolutely. There's no doubt that there's been feedback along the way. Folks I'm personally hearing are changing and maneuvering and really pivoting in their careers. This is a great opportunity for a L&D professional, I believe. Why don't we go to Lorna? Lorna, why don't you share with us who you are and your background and your acceleration moment?
Oh, that will probably take more than 4 minutes, Sharon. So,
no.
So sorry, so I can talk for England, so you need to keep me the time. My name is Lorna Matty. I'm the People Development Manager for Toyota Financial Services, Europe and Africa region, a bit of a mouthful. What accelerated my career? And it was interesting, I was talking to the panel earlier, and just reflecting on this, so many things came up. But I think I will go right back to my first job, where it was Barclays Bank, and I made a bold decision, I think, to take voluntary redundancy at a time when it was uncertain, so very uncertain times that we are now, and I decided to seek other opportunities. But the bank gave us the opportunity to have career counselling, and there was a piece of advice that I was given that still remains with me today. And that advice was, Lorna, you need to set up a business called Me PLC. So essentially, manage your career as if you were managing a business. So your marketing is your CV, your products and services are the knowledge and skills that you have.
Lorna, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Lorna. We've got a couple of comments saying they're a little bit quiet. Would you mind just bringing
your volume up? Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Sorry about that.
Can you give me a yay if that's better?
Just looking at the audience reaction.
Thank you.
Yes,
sorry
it's
about
better.
that. I don't know if I need to go back, but I was at Barclays, took redundancy, went on a career counselling. The best piece of advice I was given was to start a new business called Me PLC. So it was to really run my career as if I was running a business. So my marketing was my CV, products and services were the knowledge and skills that I was constantly developing, etc., etc. And that came into play when 5 years later I took up my first role as managing a learning development function. And it set the wheels in motion for me to move from managing myself as a business to managing my function as a business. So now I've got Kate, who's one of my coordinator in my team. We really think about our department as a business. So we talk about consumers, we talk about pain points, we talk about touch points, we talk about customer journey mapping, we talk about value proposition. And through using that language in itself, we are talking the same language as the business. So we're aligned with the business. So when I'm doing presentations, I use exactly the same language. I talk about the customer journey mapping of our staff. We talk about personas and segmentation. And that in itself, I think, gives value to what we are adding value to the business because we are aligning with how they are transforming. And Toyota is going through massive transformation at the moment, and it's all about customer centricity. So I think that piece of advice that I was given way back when I was at Barclays Bank is something that has really held me in good stead today. And I think it's when I present to the senior executives, and I was only doing that just the other day, when I was pitching an idea, when I use that word, pitch an idea, it was all about, well, how is this going to help the customer? How is this going to advance the business? It's not about what people want, it's what we need, and it's about the voice of the customer. So it's using all of those languages that the business is using at the moment, and I think that has really helped us elevate L&D as a valued partner to the business and helping out as part of its transformation. So that would be what's accelerated my career, I think.
Lorna, I think that's amazing, and I think we all need to start talking in that business language. We are business, almost engagement or sales specialists when we're trying to get learning and development into the organization and making it about the business deliverables, the business goals, the business language. I'm going to now introduce Kate Graham, and it's really interesting in the questions, Kate, we're hearing from Vanessa, who's looking to move from more of a support layer into that management layer. I only highlight that to Kate more because we're both co-founders of #WomenInLearning, and part of the big problem or the thing that's being magnified is that there's a great number, 2 to 3 women coming in support layers. And yet, when it goes to getting to this management layer, and Vanessa, I believe you'll get some tips and tricks and insight, but when you go to the executive level in L&D, that flips. So the one guy that came in is more likely, by quite a bit, to become the executive. It's 2 to 3 men in senior leadership roles to every 1 woman. This is research that Dawn had provided a couple of years ago, so we're hoping when we do the next one we'll get better results. But with that being said, Kate, I'd love for you to introduce yourself from Fosway and share with us your accelerating moment in your career.
Thanks, Sharon. Vanessa's comment actually makes me want to fast forward over what my introduction, because what we see sometimes at Fosway, we're an analyst, so we are literally just looking across learning tech, talent, HR, all the time. So we get this great bird's eye view. It's one of the real benefits of my job. And actually, generally moving from that practitioner level, designing, delivering, learning, into that management role, it is quite tricky. So we can come back to that later, and I think that's not even gender specific. So my name's Kate Graham. So as I'm head of content at Fosway Group. In terms of one moment that accelerated my career, I wish there was one. It's been a lot more than that. It's very much more incremental than that. But if I look back, it sounds a bit sort of cliche, but I think sort of paying attention and being curious is really kind of helped me along the way. So I started out on the vendor side and have transitioned into a number of different roles along the way. But I think sort of being curious and getting involved in sort of social media back in the day when Twitter started makes me feel old. But, you know, it was a great leveler. So suddenly I was having these conversations with people like Jay Cross, and I was just a marketing girl who worked for a vendor organisation. I say that just. But, you know, and I think the way that L&D works is it is very people-centric, obviously. But I find that if you put yourself in a position or ask questions and be curious, then people will really respond sort of whatever level they're at. And that's sort of connected me to lots of different people. It's really helped me network along the way. And the other kind of main thing for me, I suppose, is I have a day job, but I also have lots of what I call side hustles that make up my career. So I'm involved in the Learning Technologies social and back channel coverage. I present Learning Now television. I'm a podcast contributor. Sharon and I co-founded Women in Learning. I don't get paid for any of that stuff, but all the time I'm learning, I'm meeting people, I'm networking, I'm connecting, and I'm building out that bird's eye view of what's going on all the time. And then it helps me do my job better and hopefully lays the path for my career going forward. So not just one moment, I'm afraid, but lots of little things.
No, I think there are tons, and we've had great conversations to get to this point of preparing for the panel. I'm seeing some chat go on, and before I jump into with Donald, it's saying that, you know, it's people coming from other businesses leading learning. I just want to say we're here to say learning and development is a profession. And it would be great if people started moving the head of learning to the other business positions, because it is that valuable and it is that big a profession. So the numbers are what they are, and it could be because we're pulling from finance and that, but it's very frustrating for people that are so impassioned with learning to get a business leader who doesn't understand it kind of take the group backwards instead of having that educational mindset. So I push this forward, and this is my personal opinion, that learning and development is a profession on its own. It's not an apologetic profession. We're all very skilled and talented, and today is going to actually share with you how you can even utilize some of these skills to get further. So I love the dialogue going on there. Nothing, and all very true, absolutely. But as we talked about networking and the side hustle, which I love that term. I hadn't heard it before. I'm going to jump over to Dawn. You most all know Dawn, but please share with us what some of the catalysts were in accelerating your career.
Yeah, well, in terms of accelerating my career, Sharon, we have to go back quite a long way. I just want to pick up one thing in the chat. A number of people are saying, well, I work with learning and development people, they're all women. And that's true. And our panel here is mostly women. But the research that I did, which was 2 years ago now, and then previous to that 3 years ago, was with the members of the Learning and Skills group, and it was across 2,600 members, so quite a large sample. It might be that the group is self-selecting in some way, but across that group, it was quite clear that in the administrative and support roles, there were 2 women to every man. In the roles which had middling authority and were practitioners, there were roughly 1 man for 1 woman. And in the very senior roles, not management, but the top roles, there were 2 men for every woman. And that hasn't changed since I did the initial research. So that's where that comes from. I know we have a lot of gender balance, which is great, but the very senior roles still are not balanced. That's a sidebar. Okay, so Sharon, you were asking about accelerating my career. I was in a conference in 1999. You won't be surprised I was in a conference. I chaired the Learning Technologies Conference. I chaired Learning Performance Institute. I'm always at conferences. And this was in 1999. It was in June. I was in Hamburg. The World Wide Web was just kicking off. It was a dot-com boom. I was convinced I was going to leave the training industry and go and start up a dot-com startup that would make me millions. Nothing to do with training. And then in this conference, I looked around. It was a gala dinner. There was something like 400 people there. And I thought, you're mad, Taylor. You're mad. You don't know anything about this thing you want to go into, but these people here are your lifeblood. Look at all the connections you've got here. Stick here. So I did. I actually did a startup which revolved entirely around a small venture in learning and development, which was reasonably successful. the point about that story is that I was only able to make that call and then go on to do a successful startup and everything I've done since, because it wasn't that was the one moment that brought it home to me. But that the success I've been able to have, such as it is down to knowing people. I was going to call it networking, but actually I think knowing people and sharing with people is probably a better way of looking at it. I haven't done a job interview since 1992, and the reason is, and this is true for most jobs, not just in L&D, that they go to people who you know. And you know these people because they've done something for you in the past. So when Zara talks about getting in the room, it's getting in the room on the basis of actually some good work she's done already and thinking about it. The same is true for Kate and for Lorna, doing work, becoming a bit more visible and going out and making sure that you're in conversation with people. And the word networking has a negative connotation because it suggests some form of superficial transaction. You want to get something from people and give nothing back, but the opposite is the truth. The best form of networking is a mutual relationship where you help each other out and you're giving stuff to people, you're showing your value at the same time, and you're putting yourself on the radar. So when Kate talks about what she's done, she's progressed entirely by delivering tremendous value in her various side hustles, and of course now doing a great job as head of content at Fosway. So Sharon, that's a slightly rambling answer, but the point is that I've tried to express that I think that as well as, and this is not the only thing that matters, networking and sharing is one thing, but as well as everything else, making sure that you're on people's minds and you're connected is a crucial thing. Don't make the first contact you have with someone be a request for a job. The best time to start networking, by the way, is right now. Don't wait until you need it.
Right.
Start now, and you'll need it in 3 months' time. Sharon.
No, we actually had a big conversation. The best way to piss off your network or upset them is to start reaching out when you think you're getting laid off or furloughed, or you see that you're going to make a maneuver. People read that. So do it because it's beneficial to the person that you're reaching out to as much as for yourself. We're going to talk a little bit about that in regard to even the social media, how we relate to that and how that comes back to being part of this networking. What you did there, Dawn, you thought you rambled, but you were actually answering some of the questions that I'm seeing coming up. Some of the top 3 skills, we definitely have networking as being a key component of that. How do you move from the corporate into the consulting? Once again, much of what Dawn said and the others, but specifically the ability to make those relationships. I have a graduate 2020 who's looking for a job now, and just exposing that concept that your buddies and friends on Instagram might be always going to elevate and get you into your next job is creating a network that's really relevant to where you see yourself going. And then I thought it was neat, Andy Hyde, it's great to hear from you out there. He's another Bostonian. How do you balance, and I'm going to start with this question and then jump around to some others. Yep.
I just wanted to say, because Don sort of said there were negative connotations about the word networking, and I think having referenced the Women in Learning stuff and some of the conversations that we've had in the build-up to this session, I think that there are some negative connotations around that. But I did a podcast with Danny Seals on his podcast, and you have to have like a strap line, like a log line, and I really thought about it, and I came up with the fact that I'm a collector and a connector of people, and I think if you think about sort of collecting people into your tribe, as it were, and connecting yourself, but also how do you connect other people? It's a small point really, and it's just about the words. But I think sometimes that can help to look at it through a different lens rather than some of the negative connotations that sometimes come with networking.
Absolutely. There was a book many years ago, The Tipping Point, and they actually, put out some of these roles as to, are you a connector? Now, Kate, don't stop talking here, because we have folks on the chat and otherwise saying, Gemma, I think, was even saying, how do we keep hearing from Kate? There was a question, though, that Andy had, and he wanted to know, how do you keep that balance between the side hustle, the stuff you're not getting paid for, and then your day job, which sometimes blends and stuff. But it's a great question.
It's hard. I think you have to love it. Like, you have to enjoy it. if your side hustles feel too much like a slog, you're probably not doing the right ones. You should enjoy them. And you do have to find things that fit in. I'm a mother of 2 young children. I'm horribly guilty of overcommitting. But earlier I said to Don on a different call, I'm really glad I said no to chairing this week because he asked me if I wanted to chair some sessions. But I knew that my boss was presenting earlier in the week. We had this session today. I had other commitments around the week. So I knew in advance not to overcommit. And I think I've learned from my mistakes. But I'd say, A, find the ones that you enjoy the most, and B, don't be afraid to say no with reason. And what am I trying to say? If you say no, it's not that you won't be asked again. So I think make sure you manage that conversation. If you do need to push back, do it in a really positive way and say to somebody, please ask me again, because I would love to next time.
Don, I'm going to jump right there, but I do want to just leverage off of that, managing multiple priorities, knowing where to say no, and even knowing in your career when to go and when to stay. Don?
Agreed. I just want to back Kate up on that. Kate is fabulous, but she is a serial overcommitter, and I was really pleased when you came back and said, no, I won't do it, Don. And I understood that, and it made me quite pleased, actually, that you were able to say that, and we had the relationship where you felt comfortable doing it and you weren't going to massively overcommit in a difficult time.
So I'm going to launch in. There's a great question for all of us, and I'm going to start with Lana and Zara. But just knowing also, we also talked about volunteering, putting your hand up. So the way that I've been involved, being, from the States, you don't always get many of us into the learning technology sharing and things like that, is raising your hand. Give a little bit. Give for the sake of learning. Give to develop, and just because you want to learn from amazing people like who I've been able to meet doing many of these. So with that, though, a really great question, and it came up in both places, is how has the pandemic, unprecedented times, maybe even other things that are going on globally, how has that affected your career and what you're doing? I'm going to start with Lorna, and then I'd love to hear from Zara, and then just do the rounds if any of it's not mentioned. I think that's a great question and incredibly timely. Lorna?
Okay, so the pandemic, great. I don't think it actually changed much for my business. So I'm going back to my L&D business that I'm running as a side hustle. Because I introduced virtual classroom back in 2011. So that's when I was pitching this idea. And it came back to us, there's a question I've seen somewhere about balancing the voice of the customer and balancing the business. That virtual classroom came from the customers, and what's core to my values, if you like, is equality of opportunity. So when I talk about managing or running L&D as a business, some businesses can be quite ruthless, and I think how I avoid that is by having some core values, and very core to my values is equality of opportunity. So I always have that at the back of my mind, and it was that was at the back of my mind that introduced virtual classrooms back in 2011, because we had staff in international offices that were not getting equality of opportunity to development. So it was listening to the voice of the customer, and that was what drove it, and I used that to pitch the idea that we should use this new technology that I had no idea about. And I still remember the day when I did my first virtual classroom, and I sat there, and Sharon used the word piss, so I'm going to use the same word. I was thinking, piss in hell, what the hell am I doing here? What have I, because I'd set myself up, I'd put my neck on the line, I said that this is the way that we're going to do, never done it before. But I had faith in that conviction because I knew it was going to solve a problem. And even if it didn't work, and I have a very strong view that it doesn't have to be perfect, you can learn a hell of a lot from a failure. So I went in thinking, well, let's see what happens with this, because we've not done anything else and we don't have any other solution to this. So we did it, and it became a huge success, so much so that it was started to use commercially by the business for communication briefings, and that accelerated my career because I had the expertise, if you like. I then started to facilitate communication briefings for the organization. So I started getting involved in the business. So for the pandemic, when this happened, it was business as usual for us. In fact, so much so that we started to develop, and I can see one of the facilitators that we use is in the session here today. We ran home working modules. So within about 2-3 weeks of the pandemic hitting, we realized that a lot of managers had never worked from home before. And so we pitched the idea that we need to give them support. And because we had virtual classrooms, we were able to mobilize that within about 2-3 weeks of the pandemic. And that was so well received by our CEOs. They said, well, that was the right thing to do because it got our managers talking together. We put them in breakouts. We got them to think about what kind of things were going on, the struggles that they had. We had lots of polls. We collected data. We talked. It was a real talking point, and it was something that learning and development was leading at a time when staff were very, very in uncertain terms. So it didn't actually change anything for us. It was business as usual. And in fact, I'm busier now than perhaps I was before the pandemic.
Yeah, great question. I'm going to go on to Zara. Thank you, Laura Farish, for pointing that out. But Monica put in here, you know, do we have to be the super L&D professionals? I think yes. I think what Lorna just said there is she didn't just go into one area where she felt comfortable. It's preparation so that when something happens, hopefully, maybe in 2011 it was preparing for a whole different scenario. Nobody ever planned for a pandemic, but absolutely prepared based on, and even her alignment to core values. There was care and concern that the staff and that others were going to be prepared as well. So so many things come to mind when you think about what Lorna just shared with us. Zara, how do you think the pandemic or world events has impacted your role?
So everything's had to move virtual online. Where I work in Suffolk Council, we didn't actually have a remote way of communicating with each other, so we didn't have Teams, we didn't have Zoom or anything like that. We did manage to get that set up, but without that we would have, been a bit lost. But so I definitely think you do need to have some way to communicate, and now it's more about using what tools you do have more as effectively as possible. So trying to move away from the initial urgent rush of we just need to continue offering something, more towards what Lorna was mentioning about virtual classrooms, and actually making sure you're still getting that interaction and engagement. And especially at first, I guess people weren't thinking this would be as long term as it is, whereas now it's actually worth that investment. It's worth like going back over those quick fixes and actually trying to have it as good quality as possible, because this is what it's going to be like until the end of the year, at least. So,
well, it's probably going to change the future. 9/11 happened in the U.S. and we've never traveled the same. And my daughters were like, no biggie. But it was a big adjustment. So I think Sarah Radcliffe on here even said that this whole thing about screen fatigue and this is all going to, no, it's going to balance out. We're going to get used to it. We're going to do it better because we are professionals. And all the free programs and courses that I saw out due to the pandemic, people now, saying, nah, no, many people benefited from that. And I think, Zara, you brought up some really great points. Kate, how has the pandemic impacted your career, or do you see it impacting L&D?
I think this is less from my individual perspective. Fosway's been a virtual company for 20 years, so it was very much business as usual, apart from my kids were in the house. So it didn't affect us really in terms of our working styles. The analysts are grounded, so they usually obviously are flying around the world a lot. But we're well set up for that. What's more interesting is the research that we've done. We did a quick temperature check, like a pulse survey in May, and we've really seen different phases of this pandemic, even just in 4 months. So there was the initial, oh my God, how do I get people to work from home? Can they access stuff? Real basic things on the HR side. Did they have the data they needed to be able to report to the business on who was where and were they ill? That kind of thing. We're into now slightly more of a recovery phase, dare I say it, and people are starting to think about, okay, if this is a period now till next year, we're maybe not going back to the office, or we've got some blended workforce, some on site, some not. How do we then make that work? And then there's a lot of talk we're seeing about reboarding. So how do you bring people back in once they've been on 6 months furlough? That's not just a question of you have to wear a mask now that you're back at work. It goes way beyond that. It talks to employee engagement. It talks to well-being and resilience. There's going to be a huge amount of talk about reskilling, upskilling. So there's a company down the road from us. They've stopped what they're doing and they're now manufacturing COVID-19 tests. So it's a huge reskilling piece. L&D is pivotal to that. So, I was on a session earlier with Simon Gibson, and he said the same thing. It's a shame that it's taken this, but this is a massive opportunity for L&D. And the research that we've shown has said 95% of L&D leaders think that we're not going back from this. It's blown the argument to digital out of the water, and organisations need people with the right skills at the right time. So how does L&D step up and maximise that opportunity?
Right, right. So can we just say bravo, we're not going back? I mean, how many times, if anyone's been in the industry, that we keep hearing the same things? Is it really worth going? No, bravo, we're moving forward. We're seeing in our company that people are getting budgets that they had to justify before. The justification isn't needed. And then there's a question, Sean, you know, the work from home. Kate alluded to that. I don't know if it really matters if some roles will probably permanently move work from home, others will not, but the future of L&D will never look the same, and if we all pull it together, we're going to shine through this. So Donald, give us how the pandemic has impacted. I mean, I can say that I have more conversations with you with the bookcase behind you versus in person, but how has it impacted you and from what you're seeing, the industry?
This is the final session of an entirely online conference, and that's an illustration of the fact that clearly it's affected part of my job very substantially. On the other hand, I've worked at home from this room for the past 17 years, and in many ways my work hasn't been affected. So let me try and break that up a bit. I think the conference side of things is never going to go back to what it was. I'm firmly convinced that from as soon as we can have face-to-face events, there'll either be small events which are purely face-to-face and extremely exclusive, or we'll have large face-to-face events which have a substantial online component, because you know what, this kind of works. By the way, talking about it kind of working, I am watching a fabulous chat there.
I can't keep up. This is killing me.
I want to just say, you know, as somebody who cares for this industry, I don't want to let these questions get away. So we're going to find some way, I don't know how, of coming back and possibly just posting on LinkedIn, whatever, but we'll find a way of answering these questions, because there's real concerns here and also real opportunity to share. So thank you for putting all that out there. Like everybody else here, I've noted that we've got these phases that we're going through, and I think there are 3 phases that I call adapt, adopt, and advance. The adapt phase, that mad scramble to get over COVID-19, I think we've got through just about now. At some point in the future, we will be working in not the new normal, working in a way where things have settled down. In the middle, we have this adopt phase where we absolutely have to get things right for the future. But that doesn't mean that we use what we created to get through the adapt phase, because the adapt phase was just about throwing up any old any old solution that would get us through it, and usually that's not enough. And we saw that when in 9/11, when the stopping of traffic, of air traffic in the US, led to the creation of a lot of really bad e-learning to fill the gap, and that just continued without being changed. We've got to stop. We've got to make sure that doesn't happen this time. So our emergency measures, we need to take a really calm look at them and get over them. Now, when it comes down to the purpose of this event, sadly, I had a lot of conversations, and I'm still having conversations with people whose jobs are under threat right now because of what's happened. That's not going to change. On the other hand, there are opportunities opening up. There's no question about it in our field, and I think it unfortunately means that there's going to be a lot of reskilling required. I'm not convinced, and I'd be interested in what the panel thinks about the need for more instructional designers. I am convinced about the need for more people who are good at data, good at performance consulting, and good at live stuff online. So I think there are new skill sets which are going to be very much in demand. But as I say, I'm not convinced that instructional design is necessarily going to undergo a boom, but I'm happy to prove wrong.
Donald, I just want to jump. I did 6 months under Elliott Macy researching the topic of learning data analytics, and this was all pre-COVID, all the whole situation. At that point, data scientists were supposed to be the sexiest job of the 21st century. So just throwing that out there if you wanted it then. However, right now, it's almost the responsiveness of folks being able to do with that data. Data is still incredibly important, and even with instructional designers, I would say whatever you have in your back pocket, it's not gonna do you wrong. It's not bad to understand the designing and being able to implement really great, high-quality e-learning. I will say I've lived through a number of crisis moments, 2008 here in the States, 9/11. The bad e-learning that was in the past isn't what was deposited out there from what my view was. There was a lot of great stuff in regard to what Kate said with reboarding. So I really think we're in a different place. I think I love adapt, adopt, advance. If anyone missed that, that was amazing. I've always used engage, educate, and empower. This is an empowerment moment, but I love, these are little things. You can use these as you're talking to people. They get it. I want to just give a moment for the rest of the panel to react to some of what's being stated. You're watching the chat even better than I am and I'm looking at the questions. But I'm just going to go around the room again and just say, you know, Kate, are you picking anything up either in response to what Don asked or on chat that you want to just mention? I'll go to Zara and then I'll go to Lorna.
Yes, which is why I put my hand up. So Don picked up on something there about kind of, do we need more instructional designers? And, you know, we are seeing from Fosway's point of view, we are seeing lots of trends away from that sort of traditional instructional design. But, you know, if you're looking around your career and looking at things out there, you know, in a lot of instances, you know, companies are still hiring for what they think they need, and they're not always L&D experts. So you see sort of instructional design jobs, but sort of being rebadged as experienced designers. And somebody I spoke to in the recruitment, on the recruitment side of things, said it's like putting lipstick on a pig, which, you know, is a bit, you know, you've got to look for that. Don't sort of just be fooled by some of the new buzzwords and terms, because it might not be what the company really thinks they're getting. So that's one thing. And then the other sort of part of it really is, I think we're going to see things become a lot more fluid. There's going to be a rise of more kind of gig working or freelancing. I'm seeing some anecdotal stuff from our corporate research network come through where people maybe aren't getting permanent positions, but they are getting short-term contracts because organisations know they need this stuff. So that's quite an interesting shift for people, and I had a nice chat with Gemma on the chat here around risk-taking, and that might feel like a big risk if you're used to a permanent role, but I think the key word that we would talk about Fosway is agile. So yes, you need the digital skills, but you need to be able to be agile. So like Lorna said, you need to be able to react to the needs of the business and react to what's happening in the market as well. So if that means, you know, stepping it up or moving on to move up, or maybe taking on more kind of contract work, then that might be what the future looks like in the short term.
Can I just add something, Sharon, to the instructional designer thing as well? So it's interesting what you said, Don, that you don't think there'll be as many instructional designers. In fact, I did an instructional designer course to help me with virtual classrooms. So it was, you know, so you need that kind of skill to be able to design engaging virtual classrooms. So, and even with virtual classrooms, it may sound a bit weird, but when I design one, I think in face-to-face terms. And then from the face-to-face, I think, how do I translate it into virtual classrooms? So what I want to reassure people is if the instructional designers' jobs aren't around, you can still use those jobs or those skills or those talents into the new emerging roles that are coming out with virtual classrooms. I still, to this day, use my face-to-face skills, my developing instructional designer skills to do virtual classrooms. And I think that is what has enhanced how I deliver. So please, anybody who thinks that you need to drop all of those skills and use for the virtual classrooms, please don't think that, because I think those skills is what has really accelerated my career in this new world. So yeah.
Great, great. And Zara, anything that you're seeing in the chat? You even got me typing in here. This is just outstanding. Is there anything you want to pull out or respond to that you're seeing? And then I have another question.
So yeah, so following on from Lorna talking about using that face-to-face training experience. So I used to write activities for children, which would be educational activities, but it was aimed at it being fun, it being lively. So that's what I then try to take away and use, whether it's in a face-to-face for adults in work, or if it is a virtual. I want to still bring in that fun element. I want it to be enjoyable. I want to have that interaction. So trying to take that element and still have it, whether it's virtual or not, but have it for adults as well.
Absolutely. And that's really key. What else? Anything else there? Fun is key. I love it. we have to keep the engagement up, and that brings me back to the reboarding. Yes, we're reboarding and bringing people back, but I was doing a number of online pre-boarding programs with 2 organizations where they used it to reboard because the executive team changed. Now we have a reason to make this part of our toolkit all the time. Folks, I have a really important question from Catherine. I think this is one of the most important, especially in regard to protecting mental health and where we are today. There's so many things going on with just racial justice, the whole thing with well-being and working from home, isolation. Mental health is critical. And Catherine's asking, how do you balance pushing yourself in your career and practicing your well-being? So she didn't put mental health, but it's just an underlying elephant in the room that this is really different. We always say change is really, not everyone wants change. We have no choice. We're all experiencing something that could be comfortable or not, but now we're talking about balancing that with our careers. Dawn, do you mind if I start with you on that one? How do you balance pushing yourself in your career and protecting your well-being?
I've not always done a very good job of it, to be honest, and I tend to do what a lot of people do, is push yourself too hard and end up getting ill or just exhausted and grumpy, and then putting the load onto the rest of the family, who sort of don't go rambling on tiptoes. But, you know, it's not fair to be in a house with somebody who's absolutely knackered and hasn't had much fun that week. The other side of it, of course, is if you're running your own business as an entrepreneur, and I've seen people in the chat talking about doing it, fair play if you want to do it, and if you are thinking about doing it, please get in touch with me beforehand. I will do my best to support you in any way. You'll find yourself possibly quite under pressure doing it. So I'm afraid, Sharon,
so
I have
we have the imbalance. You're only grumpy every now and then, not all the time, Donald.
Yeah,
okay, awesome. Kate, how do you do the balance? You shared briefly before about knowing when to say, maybe I shouldn't be sharing this, and I've seen your lovely daughter and I think a little bit of your son kind of run by. But how do you do that?
Again, I've probably in the past been guilty of being a bit more like Don, but I'm trying to learn from my own mistakes. So when I had my son, I took 6 weeks maternity leave because I was running my own business. So 3.5 years later, when I had my daughter, I didn't do that because I learned from my mistakes. So I've been the queen of putting myself under pressure. I think Catherine, there's a few things I would say. Is one, you have to enjoy it. Again, I've said that already, but if you don't enjoy it, you won't be able to push yourself that extra mile. But also, the other thing that I've learned through my mistakes and through, lots of tears and blood and sweat and all of that, is I ring fence my time a lot better. So I give myself a deadline. I'll say I finish at 5 p.m. I play with my kids, and then once they're in bed at 8 o'clock, I've got permission if I want to, if I've got stuff to do, and I'll log on and do some work. I'm very productive in the evening. I'm not so much of a morning person. So, and then I'm allowed to do that until sort of 11 o'clock, by which time I promise myself that I will switch off and read a book or do something to chill out and go to sleep. So I think it's, and everybody works differently. I know there are people on here who are much more morning people than I am. So it is about what works for you, but it's ring fencing, I would say, giving yourself some sort of time limit to do things in, and then say, well, I'm going to force myself to go and do this, do my family, whatever it is. Really try and do that. There'll always be peaks, but if you can try and ring fence, that's probably my best bit of advice.
That's awesome. That's great. And I think we all kind of, if you love it, make your job your hobby. Someone said that to me, and that's going to be turning you down, not like you want to balance it, but you love it. If you're not loving it, please leave it. It's a hard thing, but you really, and I can see by the chat how many people are loving it. Someone even said it's passionate. Zara, how do you do that balance, taking care of yourself and building your career?
Badly. But I think you need to just try to work. But I think it's more just, as long as you're aware of it, and it is finding that balance, because I'm also someone that will probably just say yes to a lot of things, because it's, I can't think why not. And there's, even from before when I've been volunteering, that it's like, actually, these are really good opportunities. I've learned a lot from it, but when you're packing that and full-time jobs and second jobs and whatever side hustle things you've got going on, it can be a lot. So I think it's making sure that you work out what your limit is and know when to say no, and that's okay. But definitely what Kate said about letting them know that you'll be up for it next time if it's right for you. And I definitely think it's harder when you are working from home to get that switch off. Yes. So just being really strict about it and having so like for me, I like watching theatre. Haven't been able to do that, but there's been a lot of online theatre, so that's kind of, yeah, so after my presentation yesterday, I was quite nervous. That was what I did in the evening to just relax. It's like, okay, I can now watch a show, and
excellent. The balance is really critical. They're saying here too that most people are working through their commute. So part of loving coming into this every other day is I've got like maybe an hour. It used to be 3 hours. It's cut down. It's only 20. But now I get that space. And then even prepping for something like this takes a lot out of it. Lorna, how do you do that balance? And then we've got a few other questions here before we wrap up as well.
I think I agree with Zara badly. But I think when I started trying to accelerate my career, really, especially when social media took off, I felt I had to be on Twitter, I had to be on LinkedIn, I had to be on everything. And then I just thought, this is just crazy. For a start, I didn't like half of the social platforms anyway, so I was engaging with things that I didn't actually really like. And so one of the tips for me is choose a minimum amount of social network and stick with that, and stop trying to spread yourself all over the place, because you are just going to make yourself go crazy. So for me, I just stick to Twitter and LinkedIn, and that's about it, and I just ignore everything else. I have an Instagram account, but that's just for personal stuff. In terms of the day, I do try to finish at a certain time, and I do have several hobbies, which I think is actually a really important thing to have. You know, Zara was talking about theatre, mine is sewing, and I'm actually in my sewing room. You can't see that because I've got a screen behind me, so you can't see my haberdashery shop, which somebody called it the other day. I nearly slapped them, or a virtual slap. Can you have a virtual slap, actually? I think you need to have a virtual slap. There's a hands up, but not a slap. Anyway, digress. So the sewing thing really, really helps me because, and I think anybody that has a hobby will practice a skill that every organization is looking for at the moment with transformation, which is a test, fail, and learn. So, you know, when I've sewn things, the unpicker is my favorite friend. How many seams have I unpicked because I've not done it right? But I've learned from it. And that just taps into a different part of my brain to kind of, and that helps with the bravery of trying things, because if I'm trying things in my social, safe environment, it kind of gives me this anchor to think, well, in the workplace, it wasn't that bad. You tried something and it didn't work. What's the other way around of it, or a different way of thinking about it? So I think limit what social media I do, have a hobby that you can switch off, but also helps with your work, if you like. And I'm a firm believer of going for a walk. I think when I go for a walk, I have so many ideas. I don't have any music whatsoever. It's silence, complete and utter silence, and I love it. And you take in things around you. And one of the things I've loved in this pandemic is I've gone for walks, and I've walked, and the roads that I've driven down, and I've never noticed houses, flowers. I've found an organic shop that I've driven past so many times that I never knew was there. I started to talk to people with mask on, obviously, but you know, you start. There is a community of people that go out walking or jogging or cycling or whatever the case may be, and there's like a community out there that I didn't know. And for me, that has just enhanced some senses. That when I was stuck in my car on this commute in an office, it's kind of given me a kind of a new outlook on what life is all about. And I think that has also enriched how valuable my family is, and how valuable my friends are, and how valuable, you know, health is. So actually it's helped me to think about that perspective much more, and wanting to do more about looking after my health, looking after my family, looking after my friends, doing things for other people. You know, I helped make scrubs for the NHS, and it was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. And you start meeting other people who are in, you know, just wanting to give. And, you know, when we're talking about a world where it's all these horrible things that you're hearing about, when you start actually seeing the beauty of life and the beauty of what is around you, it actually is very uplifting. So
no, I think it's huge. I think, sorry for interrupting, Lorna, but you're bringing up, there's so many positives that can come from this situation. And this mental health, do you have any last tip just before we jump on to the last question?
Okay.
No, it's amazing. Raise a hands if you can do that here. Just how many people are walking their spouses or walking their kids and things that you wouldn't think of doing. I love that, bringing in the hobbies. Also, there was a question about mentors. And I think really this balancing of being able to get your career engaged and how to take care of yourself. If you don't have a mentor or a sponsor, please, I think Dawn's laughing at something. I hope it's something really good there. Okay, Kate, yes?
Andrew, actually, Jacobs asked a question about mentors, which I think is probably worth touching on.
Okay, can you
it just says, has the panel engaged mentors, and what would you would you advise to people thinking about it?
I'm going to just start and kick this off that the way I even got involved in all this stuff, Dawn, Taylor, Nigel Payne, Elliot Mace, there's no level that's too small or too reverse mentoring. I learned a lot from Annalyn, who was a 30 under 30. Mentors, and then don't forget the concept of a sponsor. A sponsor is in the business, which will actually know so much about you that they can elevate you when you're not in the room. But mentors, I think, are key to that balance. Let's start with yourself, Kate. Do you have many mentors? Have you found that valuable?
Yes, on all levels. I wouldn't say I consciously asked them to be my mentor, but it's sort of developed over time. So my boss now, David Wilson, I've known him for a long time, and my colleagues, that's one of the other points that I would say is that I learn so much from my colleagues every day, and we are all in charge of our careers. So, you know, work somewhere where you get that input and that inspiration, right? John, you know, whether he likes it or not, is definitely one of my mentors, and it's something that I have sort of, in the last year or so, I've had people approach me and say, would you be my mentor? And it's a really interesting dynamic as I've obviously got a little bit older, to suddenly sort of think, oh my goodness, you know, does anybody know, you know, want to know what I have to say? But I would always say that, you know, people have very generously given me their time, and I have had lots of people, like I say, ask me in the last year, don't be afraid, but don't just, it's like you said, don't just make it kind of, you know, I'm looking for a new job and I'm panicking. You know, if you're committed to your own development and you ask people in a nice way, then I think you'd be amazed how many doors would open and how many people would give you their time. So I would 100%, not necessarily a formal arrangement, but chat to people. Ask people if they can spare you half an hour for a virtual coffee. Right. And so, sorry.
I think you mentioned the concept of being deliberate and intentional. Now, Don, I think you have something. Did I see a note come to me? Okay. Yeah, we have 5 minutes left, so this is good. Let's do it. And then you let me know if we can stay on longer.
It's one person, Uzma, who's raised a question which has been I think it's quite a common question for a lot of people in the room. And I'm sorry to cut across the mentoring question, but I do feel for her, and I suspect that other people in the room will also want to have this question answered, which is why I think it's important. I'm a teacher. I've been for 20 years. I'm desperate to get into learning and development, specifically blended learning and instructional design. How do I go about it? I just think there are probably
Don, I just want to mention, this was brought up in the other 2 times that I've run this topic before. There's various people. Some people don't want to deal with past educators. The bulk I've experienced definitely want to. My number one step, and I'll be quiet because I'm a panel facilitator, I'm not part of it, is reach out to myself, reach out to folks that you're seeing in these sessions that has been all week. The best way that I've maneuvered and been able to switch even angles, I was in broadcast media, is reaching out to the people that you aspire, that you think are doing it the way you would want to do it, and getting real advice. But I think that background, what Zara said about keeping it fun, being able to relate if they're school teachers, that is all needed in the adult area. To the rest of you, Lorna, what do you think on this?
It's a really difficult one. Let me try and answer it from a recent experience, because I have recruited somebody recently. And when I recruited them, I was really looking for, strangely enough, not what you probably call the traditional skills. I was looking for somebody who had customer centricity, somebody who was using the skills that perhaps with the new skills of L&D. And some of the CVs that came past were very, very interesting. And it was only because I had so many CVs that I couldn't look at all of them. But there were people that were coming from the hospitality business who were actually singing or saying something very, very strong to me about how they were looking at the customer need and how they were addressing that. And I think don't lose that side of it, because I think that is vital in learning and development. It isn't all about the hard skills, because for us to hear our voice in the business, it is about, as I said before, having a consumer side to things. So I'm not sure I'm able to answer it specifically, but I think it is about reaching out to people such as people on this panel here, L&D tweets that are happening on Twitter, and asking that question, but also keeping an eye, coming back to that Me PLC that I talked about right at the beginning. Thank you, Sharon. Keep an eye on the market. What is it that people are asking for and after? And think about that and how you can transfer those skills.
So it doesn't have to be what Lorna said, that don't worry too much about you're in a different industry. Yeah, there will be some employers that don't want to hear from teachers.
Cool.
But
quickly, Zara.
Most will recognise that there's things, whether you've been working in marketing, whether you've been working in teaching, whether you've been working in retail, that you can transfer over. Recognize and understand those skills and really promote those and talk about those and how it translates, because those all have skills that we do need in L&D anyway. But in terms of the element of needing a portfolio, if you'd asked me this last year, I'd say no, because I'd never been asked for one. I think now I have been, and it's something that I would definitely try to put together, something that's a bit neater. I think look out for the free trials to try to be able to create content and ask people if there's anything that they'd like you to make. Just talk to people so that you get that chance to talk to a subject matter expert and create something for them. So yeah, put something together.
Wow. Really, really relevant. And my last thing is volunteer your time, just like we were saying. Put your hand up, get involved with projects so you have something there. We're at wrap-up time. And Don, I know you have one thing to say. I'm just going to let folks know that on the left here we have top tips.
I think
there's
everyone's
a PDF of top tips. These don't even encompass half of the richness of the dialogue. So I'm sure we'll be sending some sort of follow-up. We can stay on. I believe I got permission to do that. Don, is that correct? James, can we put up the closing? There was a closing screen. And then we can still keep the conversation going. I want folks to be able to reach out to us. This has our LinkedIn connections. I want to do my job as a panelist and make sure if you need to jump, please do. But we're going to stick on. We're going to carry on the conversation just a little bit longer. Super excited to do this. This is just bringing up so many more topics and direction. Some of it, lapping over the many times I've dealt with this topic, but we're hitting some richness here. So I'm just going to throw it back out. Kate, are you seeing anything, I know you're chatting along there, that we might want to wrap into this? And then if you had anything to add in regard to the teachers, we can get your thoughts on that real quickly as well.
I think it's not specific to teachers coming into the profession. I think it's about transferability of skills. And we have actually, in some of the research we've done recently, we've had some really kind of tough qualitative answers from people who are face-to-face trainers, for example, and in a similar boat thinking, well, where does this leave me now? And it is about being able to pull on those transferable skills, because actually mastering something like this platform or Zoom, that's not the clever part of being able to transfer into online learning. And Lorna is, the master of this, one of the original award winners of being able to do this. But if you've got some skills in being able to deliver face-to-face training, then you're going to be able to transfer those over. And I'd say that's the same for teaching or anything else. So really think about the value that you have. And at the moment we're seeing, it is about what's really business critical. The nice to have stuff is probably going to have to wait in, the next 6 to 12 to 18 months. So how can you help a business accelerate what it wants to do? And think about it from a skills and outcome point of view, not just your past experience.
Great, great. There's a question here, new question. Making the jump from subject matter expert to leader, what's the skills gap if there's any interest in that area? And then as you're answering that, there's another question saying, how did you get into it? I'm just going to put 80% of the time I've led a panel like this, most people say it was an accident that they got into it, and really that has evolved to saying make nothing an accident, make everything intentional. But how do you go from subject matter expert to leader? Why don't we start with Zara? You don't see. I did that on purpose. I did that on purpose. We don't have an imposter syndrome here, but you've been amazing, Zara, and I wouldn't have met you unless for this panel. You are a leader. I don't know if you consider yourself that.
Through the connections, so signing up for the 30 on the 30 for sure.
I mean,
because otherwise I would probably wouldn't be on anyone's radar right now. But yeah, so I think it's more just looking out for those opportunities, just taking the risk, because I didn't think I'd get chosen, but here I am. And then yesterday I was presenting, which I've never done before. So it's just brought so many new opportunities for me. I think so in terms of the changing from subject matter expert, recognizing your knowledge, because early on, especially when I was more junior, that I didn't realize that actually when it comes to the digital side of things, when it comes to the blended learning side of things, I was actually the most knowledgeable person in the room. So I kind of always looked at it as you've got 10, 20 years of experience, but not necessarily in this specialism. So I think recognizing the different specialisms, and that even though other people might be more experienced, you might actually be the specialist in that area, and be willing to share your knowledge.
I think that's a great avenue of saying, utilizing your knowledge and your specialty to lead, so that people want to follow. Without going around, raise a hand of anyone else that wants to add to that.
It's not in the useful resources box, it's in the files to download box.
We can't hear.
And hopefully you can see that. If you can't see it, and I've got an iPad here as well as a PC, and you may not be able to see it, okay? If you can't see it, don't panic, all right? Because all of the assets here are going to be. I think the visibility issue, James, is more to do with the platform people are viewing it on. I can't see it on my iPad. I can't see it on my PC. So I'm just putting a note here in the chat area. The recording slides and other supporting documents, like those top 10 tips, will be available from that link. Okay, because you've come here, you'll get a link to that, so please don't worry. That's going to be ready to download. You'll get the mail out. It's going to be Wednesday or Thursday of next week when we've got all the assets sorted. Sorry, it's not an answer to the question, but I can see a lot of people getting concerned.
Yeah, so I think that's great. That's a real important thing. You'll notice, too, in that PDF, there's the concept of risk taker. And we must have spent 25 minutes yesterday saying, is risk taker appropriate in this environment that we're in now? So I love the way Zara explained that. It was done with deliberate intention. Taking a bit of a risk meant going out of her comfort zone. We also supported getting involved. Top 10 tips, it was, we started this at 8 or 9 a.m. my time, and I was up till 1 a.m. So I don't know if I have all 10 there. There's tips, and there's at least 8. So apologies, that was my lack of balancing my personal and my professional, but just I know how to count. Don has it right on the other. Lorna, Kate, is there anything that you're seeing that I want to make sure we get back to folks on? Because I know you guys are scrambling away here, and I want to make sure we attend to what's hot on the chat. Kate?
I don't know about anything hot on the chat.
There's a couple of really good pieces of advice which I'm now not going to be able to find, am I? Mark. So thanks for the top tips, Mark. I'm not going to say his surname right, but apologies if this was discussed and I missed it, but my career acceleration has definitely been to find a stretch project that I can own and demonstrate my potential to leadership. And I think when we were in the discussions before the session, Zara said about something else. She said, I didn't realise I could just put my hand up. And I think it's about removing that permission to put your hand up and go, you know, if you're in an organisation, put your hand up, get in the mix. Again, I was in a session earlier where they were talking about, do you know the project management office in your organisation? Do you know the folks in sales? Do you know the folks in marketing? Get in amongst it, because that's how you'll get these snippets of, oh, maybe there's a big change happening in sales, and maybe L&D has a role to play within that, and maybe you can lead that initiative that leads straight to those bottom line results. So I think that's just, I wanted to pick up on that because I think that's really great advice from Mark.
That's great.
Can I just build on that?
I agree.
Because the story that I think I shared with the panel before was I work for Toyota, and it's fairly male-dominated, and a female director was on LinkedIn for having won an award. And she's in a different part of the business, and I just reached out to her on LinkedIn saying how wonderful that was, etc. She arranged for her PA to have a meeting with me, but I actually saw her in the canteen because I recognized her face from LinkedIn, and I went up to her and introduced myself. And that has actually, I've done that a couple of times. In fact, that's how I first met Don. I don't know if he remembers that, but I stalked him. I stalked him at the Learning Technologies exhibition, and I had sent him an email, and he hadn't responded. And I saw him at the exhibition, and I thought, right, he doesn't know who I am. And this is one of the things I've learned in working with our senior executives. A lot of the time, they don't know who you are. They may know that there's a function, but they don't know your name. And if you want to be known, you have to go up and say hello to them. So with Don, I saw him at the exhibition.
I said, hello, I owe you an email. I think I did
hello, I'm
say
Lorna Matty. And he went, hello. And that was about 3 or 4 years ago. I had seen him before.
Amazing.
And interestingly, yes, you did. Yes, you did do that. And with Kate, I met Kate because she was at the Learning Awards and she was tweeting. And it was when I had first started Twitter. And I thought, what the hell is this woman doing on a smartphone all evening? It was really driving me nuts. And then we realized she was tweeting. And I didn't know anything about Twitter. So we went up to her, me and a colleague, and we introduced ourselves to Kate. So that's how I first met Kate. So it's, you know, we talked about networking earlier on. You can do it.
I just have to add,
as well as
Lorna doesn't mention how I met her because I crashed in and well, she was having drinks at Nigel Payne and I just crashed in and here I am from the States, came all the way in Boston just to knock into it. I think what we're learning here right now, folks, is the biggest part to accelerating your career is taking the moment with it online. I've picked up these things called hang tens just to talk to people. Make the moment to introduce yourself. Lorna, you bring up a great thing and you may even want to expand on this because I know we talked about it, about personal brand. Make sure you in that introduction, you have your personal brand. You already know what that is. I know that came up in the dialogue. I didn't know if you wanted to reference or jump off of that as well.
Well, as I said before, with that Me PLC, one of the things I do is I update my CV every year. And I actually say to my direct reports, anybody who reports into me, you must do your CV every year. And they look at me as if I'm absolutely nuts. And I said, well, no, it's about looking back on the past 12 months as what you have achieved. And you must make sure that you update your marketing brochure. No company is going to keep a marketing brochure for 20 years in their shop.
Right.
No, they don't do that. They update it probably more regularly than that, every 3 months. And yet, for some of us, we have our CV for 20 years and then we brush it off when we desperately need a job, and that's the wrong time to do it. So, you know, for your brand, you've got to invest in it. So if your CV is your main marketing tool, then update it on a regular basis. And Kate, I can see you're on this session. Kate's my direct report. I said that to her from the very first time she joined. She went, Lorna, what do you mean I have to do my CV? Do your CV. So I think things like that.
In your bio.
And
absolutely.
Yeah, because you start to articulate it. And where I also started to articulate how well I did was when I started entering awards and things like that, because I had to think about what it was I was doing, what it was the value that I was bringing. And just, I mean, even if you don't enter awards, that whole process of actually thinking about what it is that you have done and then articulating it to another person, it is in itself a very valuable process, because I'm you may not think this, but I'm an introvert. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on in my head, but I don't often verbalize it. So actually giving the opportunity for me to say, well, this is what I do, and actually try and practice doing that, actually was a very valuable process for me.
Great.
Great.
I love that.
I'll shut up now.
Go ahead, Kate.
Sorry. I was just going to say, on LinkedIn, it's building on Lorna's point, but on LinkedIn now, on your profile section, there's a highlights section, and you can link to PDFs, videos, articles, and it's almost like a showcase of your latest stuff. So that's just to build on what Lorna said, because actually that's a really great way of being able to upload things. Maybe you don't have a website, you don't have a blog, but actually you can still link to content that you've created, or, you know, whatever that might be, or articles that sit elsewhere on the internet, and sort of going through that and thinking, what have I done in the last 12 months that I can share? You know, it builds on that point as well. And I think that point of reflection is really important.
Super. I'm going to just quickly read out the tips, and then Dawn, I'm going to have you, because I know you want to say that, but we've mentioned so much of these. So just to remind everyone, we have stay in the driver's seat of your career. We have details around that. Work hard and be low maintenance. Doesn't mean don't be a troublesome person, but it just means be low maintenance. Take the call. We're saying this there. Have your CV ready. Lauren, I think these are all things that everybody can do a little bit of. Share your intent. So state and share it. Make sure you're intentional. Don't be a risk taker, but get involved. Maybe like balance that in today's build relationships and trust yourself, which is, oh, I love it. Hi, Kate. So cute. That's the way to balance life. So, Dawn, why don't you kind of wrap up? We're hitting the minute before we are going to wrap up. This has been one of the most rewarding experiences for me, and how I accelerate my career doing things like this and meeting amazing folks like yourself.
I was very enthusiastic in the text about having your own website. I do appreciate it's a bit of effort involved in that, but I think what Kate, Lorna, and Zara have all pointed out here is that the key thing is to control your profile online, because trust me, if you're not running your profile, either somebody else is, and they're saying something about you don't know, or nobody is. And darling, as Oscar Wilde says, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. So make sure that your profile is out there and you're in control of it, and you're having a place, one way or the other. Maybe it's on LinkedIn, as Kate says, maybe it's your own website, but I think running it is a great thing to do. I'm just going to drop those. I've just dropped the top 10 things into the chat area there, so everyone, not chat area. Yeah. Control the narrative. Great way of putting it.
Just building on that one, it's about controlling the narrative, because I once took a job. I once took a job and I realised pretty early on it was a big mistake, and I was really worried. I was really worried after I left after 11 months. And I was really worried about how people would perceive that, and that's actually when I started my blog, so I could tell that story. I don't update my blog that often, but it's there if and when I want to share things.
We've had a note,
so I think
that it's
just to build on that, and definitely control your own narrative. Nobody else should be making assumptions about your story.
Is that actually kind of a question? It's actually kind of a question, because I've pretty much had a new job every year, and I know that for a lot of younger people that's kind of nowadays what happens. You're not in a job for life, you're maybe doing projects. How do you view that? Is that kind of okay, or do you look at that and think flight risk?
So, Zara, it matters if it's intentional. Now, I'm not young. I'm not a 30 under 30, not near it. But I had, in a matter of 3 years, 5 jobs. Just maneuvering. It's either internally, externally. It's your story to write, and it goes back to what Kate said. Creating your narrative, I think, is the key component. For some people, they can have one company for 13 years and have 17 jobs. I think it's your narrative, and if you stand behind it. If it's accidental and it's coming at you, that can be difficult, and that means you need to be aware of it. This is a great wrap-up question. Dawn, Lorna, Kate, raise your hand if you have anything to add to that. Okay. When we exit, we're going to... Sorry.
I was going to say, I don't have a problem with somebody having a different job every year. It's what you've done differently. So if you're just repeating, then, you know, that's when I think you're jumping from one job to another and there's a problem. But if you are evolving and developing your career, I don't have a problem with that, personally.
Super. So we're going to wrap this up with everyone giving their last word. I'm going to just say engage, educate, empower. That's how I'm going to close, and then we'll all do the, I don't know if you've seen this before, but the Zoom wave or the Adobe wave or something that all makes us feel better. Then going to go to Zara, Lorna, Kate, and Dawn. I'm going to have you be our finale in the wave out. And folks, you can reach out to all of us. You have the information. So Lorna, your departure. Mine is engage, educate, empower. Lorna.
Oh, I'm still trying to look at everything that's going around. I think just listening to this panel discussion, I think my career is still continuing. So, you know, I'm just thinking, you know, I'm a baby boomer. Just saying. And I just think that there is still more to come, and there is still an exciting time to be in learning and development, and there's much more to learn, etc. So I'm enthused by listening to everybody and thinking, yeah, there's still more that I can learn and still more that I can do to accelerate my career. So I hope everybody has got something from this, because I've learned from just looking at that panel.
Yeah, so I've learned a lot on this panel myself,
so Gen X,
and I would just say, especially for the people who are new into L&D or quite early in their career, just be open, try to connect, be willing to learn. There's so many resources out there, so just try to soak it all up and find out what your interests are, because learning is so broad that just see what you'd be into. And yeah, there's so many people to follow, and the community is so nice and open. So don't be afraid to connect, to say hi, and to reach out face to face or virtual.
Super, super. Kate?
A couple of points for me. So I would say this, but look at the research. Go to fosway.com. All our stuff is free to download. But stay up with the trends. Stay on top of what's happening. And look outside the L&D bubble as well. I've just taught myself how to use TikTok. And the hashtag TikTok for Learning has had something like 7 billion views in lockdown. And then I had a conversation with a corporate last week about how they could use TikTok for learning internally. So, don't limit yourself to L&D. Look at the research, but also collect and connect as many people as you can.
Oh my God, let's all do a TikTok. That would be fabulous, right? My kids won't do it with me. I'm all ready to dance. Anyways, with that in mind, I think it would be so cool, L&D TikTok. Dawn, final words, please.
Team here as well. James Booth, Michelle Paris-Slater, Sarah Ratcliffe, and Virginie Chasserot. When something is as busy as this, you absolutely need a background team. They've made it fly, so thank you very much, team. And for me, if you're looking at your career in L&D, I want to echo what the team said. Be useful, because that's how you prove your value. Be open to new ideas and new opportunities, and be available. Get out there and connect. And with the other things, you'll find sooner or later people start coming to you, and that's when your career starts taking off. Useful, be open, be available. Good luck.